So, what were your parents like, and what kind of values did they instill in you?
Well, I don't want to sugarcoat things, though. I'm gonna talk as honestly as I can about the situation. I had a rough upbringing. My brother has been in and out of rehab 3 or 4 times. I think he's on his fourth rehab. Uh, my parents were not educated. It was a tough household to grow up in because there was constant economic stress and constant tension. But they loved us. And I think at the end of the day, as you get older, and this is a learning message to all the young people that listen to you, Randy, your parents are probably just trying to do their best. They are coming into life with their own environmental issues and their own natural issues. And so, my parents, they came from two immigrant families. My grandparents got here from Italy impoverished. One side, the Scaramuccis, went to work in the coal mining town of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. The DeFeos, my mother's side, my grandfather, Augustine, was an auto mechanic, and then he was a mason, and then he had a small store, but they struggled. And so this was a family, that was, I would say, a blue-collar family. The only thing I would say that is different today is that my dad had a living wage. So he was a crane operator. He worked 42 years for the same company, but that was enough money to live in a small house. Maybe it was 1,300 square feet. 5 people lived in that house. We had one full bath. We did not grow up poor. I would never tell anybody that. My father was a super hard worker. I would never, be disrespectful to my dad's work ethic by suggesting to anybody that I grew up poor. I did not grow up poor, but we had a rough house. It was not an easy place. And I think what happens to you as you're growing up, you start to idealize your future. And I can remember back in the mid 70s when my father lost his overtime. That was a very, very big deal in my family because you got paid time and a half. If you work Sunday, you got double time. And so those weekend days or time after 3 p.m., that was an important time for my father. So I can remember my mother putting his lunch pail in the refrigerator, 9:30 at night. My dad was in bed early. He got up at probably 4 o'clock in the morning. He was on the job site at 5, 6 o'clock. He worked to 2:30. If he had overtime, he would come home at 5. If he didn't have overtime, he'd come home at 2:30. And then he had the opportunity to work on the weekend. So when they cut his hours back, that created stress and anxiety in the family. So I was probably 11 or 12 years old. I said, okay, I got to go get a job. I went and got a paper route, and I started hustling papers in my town. I put the baskets on my bicycle at 10 speed. I had one of those paper carrier pouches. And then I convinced the local manager of Long Island's Newsday to give me free papers on Wednesday. I used to go into the apartment buildings near my house, and I used to hand out papers. And then I would ring the doorbells. These women, Randy, they were all Jews, Italians, and Irish. Okay. And every single one of them knew my mother. I mean, my mother was like Siri or Alexa before there was a Siri or like, if you wanted to know who was screwing who or who was having an affair in the town or what the hell was going on, my mother knew the answer. All you had to do is pick up the phone and call her. And so all these old ladies, I mean, they were probably young ladies at that time, 35, 40 years ago, but they were friends of my mom. And I said, hey, how are you, Mrs. Sheridan? Oh, great. I just dropped off the paper. Did you enjoy Newsday? Oh, you did. Great. Do you want to subscribe? And I guilted every one of those Jewish, Italian, and Irish ladies into subscribing to the paper. So I had like the largest paper out in the town. I was clearing about $45 a week. I put $15 in my pocket for my personal consumption, and I gave $30 to my parents. And I've been in a negative subsidy to my parents since that day. I mean, there was just never, it was always and this is why I have such empathy for blue collar people, because you're always on this treadmill, you're always working, and you've always got this anxiety, and there's a little savings. But that's what was motivating to me. And I became an entrepreneur born from those experiences. But my parents loved me. They were good. They are good people. My dad's 86. My mom's 84, but they were uneducated. And it was a rough neighborhood. It was a rough house. And so, I don't want to sugarcoat it, because I think if you sugarcoat stuff and you start to build this hagiography, it's very, very bad for your kids. I don't want my kids to see me without my flaws, or to revise history. I'm not interested in revising history. I'd rather tell it the way it was, so that people can look at it and say, okay, wow, that's really raw, that's powerful, and it's authentic. And, there were a lot of fist fights. There were a lot of fist fights in the neighborhood. There were, well, you didn't back down in my neighborhood, I can tell you that. I mean, we're going to get into the Trump stuff later, but you weren't allowed to come back into if you backed down in a fight, it was like, you couldn't do that. You can't back down in a fight. So, but that was my upbringing. And I will say this about my dad, which I always respected about him. He was very honest. He still is. And I'll tell this story. We were in Main Street. He got a parking ticket on the main street in the town. He took the ticket. He walked up to the post office and got a money order to pay the ticket. Pops, why are you doing that? I don't want it over my head. I don't want the ticket over my head. The meter expired. Dad, you could go home and write a check out of the checkbook and then mail it tomorrow. No. I got to get it done right now. That was my father. And he was a big guy in the live below your means sort of thing. He was one of his lines that are always in my head. I tell my kids this, although, I spoiled the living. Are you allowed to curse on this? Or no?
Yeah, I mean, no, okay. We're going to be ourselves.
I don't know. I mean, I'm
you can
myself.
let it. Yeah,
fire away. I mean, I don't know. My kids, I basically, I spoil the living shit out of them. Okay, I'm sorry I said shit, but that's exactly what it is. Spoil the living shit out of them. And so they're not thinking like that. That's fine. We've shifted the generation and we've made some money. But my father was always like, if you can't afford the price of the movies, or you can't afford the price of the ticket, don't go to the movies. That was my pops. Okay. And so I have no debt. I pay all my taxes on time. I have no anxiety related to that part of money. The anxiety I have related to money is, holy shit, better make some more money because life is uncertain. We're going to touch off huge inflation here momentarily, and you better be in the game. You better be making money.
So your dad set a really good example on the work ethic front. When you had a paper route, sounds like you worked very hard at that, and very entrepreneurial of you to get the free papers and then sell them. What did you do for fun? Kids like to have fun. Did you play sports?
Yeah, that was the heartbreak for Mr. Fusco. May his soul rest in peace. I was a pretty good baseball player as a kid. And so I took on a lark. I tried out for the junior varsity baseball team in my town. You could be in the 8th grade and you were eligible for junior varsity baseball. And so I had that paper route the 5th, 6th, and 7th grade. The summer of the 8th grade, it would be like March of 1978. I tried out for the team and I made the team. Now, young girls, Randy, were way more important than papers. Okay. So I quit the paper route so I could play baseball. And so I've always been a baseball enthusiast, a baseball buff. I owned a piece of the New York Mets for a period of time. I sold it to Steve Cohen last year, lifelong Met fan. So I've always been a sports enthusiast, try to get to the gym regularly, but I was a pretty decent athlete as a kid. My friends break my onions now because, I'm obviously a little short guy, but as a kid, I have to bring my yearbook. That's how embarrassing I am as a person, Randy. I have to bring my high school yearbook in once in a while and show my gravitas in high school athletics. But so I was always into athletics. I'm a big reader. I read constantly. I like the outdoors. I have a place where, we go skiing in the winter. Obviously, I love water sports. I lived on Long Island, so it was impossible not to be involved with the water. So in the summer, I was a water skiing enthusiast, fish, clam. I don't know. You grew up in Chicago. Where did you grow up, Randy?
Detroit.
Okay. So you grew up in the Midwest. So, you probably were around the lakes. So, I mean, I enjoyed all of that in the summer. I was always an entrepreneur though. So I got the baseball thing figured out. So then I went to the local shopping store, like the Key Food. I don't know what they called it in your area. Maybe it was an Acme or a Stop and Shop or something like that. Out where you are now, it's Ralph's. I went to the supermarket and I cut a deal with the manager where I told him, look, I can't tell you when I'm going to start, but I'll punch the clock, I promise, with the timestamp. So because I was playing baseball. And so if we had a road game, I may get there at 7:00. If I didn't have a road game, I may get there at 6:00. And so I cut a deal with the manager where after school sports, I would go stock shelves in the local supermarket, mop the floors. Sometimes they gave me freezer duty. I hated that because you were like freezing your ass off while you're trying to put everything together. But to this day, you will see me take the shopping cart and roll it back up to the front of the store and put it into the other shopping carts to this day because of that job. And, he's another guy that passed away. This guy was an amazing guy. He was an amazing entrepreneur, Italian-American. I remember, and he loved me. I mean, knock on wood. If you have time for this 30-second story,
Sure.
I'm in the place. I can tell you the exact day. It was a weekend, or school was out. It was June 30th, 1980. I can tell you the exact day. I can tell you the weather. Okay. It was blazing hot summer day. This idiot backed up the Coca-Cola truck into the loading bay, and we had glass bottles back in the day. All the glass bottles came out of the truck, landed in the loading area, exploded everywhere. My boss is on the up. These are Scaramucci, come to the back. Instead of clean up on aisle 7, you got to go out and mop up and like sweep up the loading. And there's broken glass everywhere. The guy was drunk, actually. You could smell the alcohol on the driver. So I had my little apron on and my little pants, and I went out there and I got stung by every yellow jacket on Long Island. Okay, they were crawling up my pants. They were attacking me in the back. And I came in, I was swollen with bee stings. And I was like, oh my God, I gotta go to college, man. I mean, there is no way I'm doing this for a living. I just looked at him. I said, I don't know where I'm going to college, but I'm going to college. I'm not doing this for a living. And that was a big moment for me. I know that sounds crazy, but it was like my family was a family of workers. They're working class people. So my parents wanted me to go to college, but they didn't know the difference between these colleges. When I got into Tufts, my father thought it was spelled Toughs. He had no clue. Okay. And then, it probably sounds nuts, but when I got into Harvard, my parents had the map out. They had like one of those old Rand McNally maps. And my mother had like the yellow highlighter taking us to Hartford. Mom, why do you have us going to Hartford? You're not going to Hartford Law School? I said, no, Mom, I'm not going to Hartford Law School. Well, why would they call it Hartford Law School if it's not in Hartford? Because it's not called Hartford Law School. It's Harvard Law School, Mom. And that was my life. Okay, so my parents had no clue. They just wanted me to get educated, and they, and that's how it happened. Here's the thing. That's what I love about you, okay? I'm telling you the raw, naked, unvarnished. This is how it went down. Okay, I had the gold chains. I had the 1979 Berlinetta Camaro that I bought from the Sunoco station, which my parents didn't want me to buy, but I had saved up the money quietly to buy it. And I got an Alpine power booster in there. I don't know if you guys did that in Detroit, but yep. I'm probably half deaf because of that. And I had all my little cassette tapes. And I used to drive the girls down to Jones Beach. I used to put 7 or 8 people in that car. And of course, because my uncle had a motorcycle shop in the town, and I didn't mention that, but I worked there too. So I worked there on the weekends. So I learned how to drive when I was 14. I got in my first car accident when I was 15. And I can remember having like too many people in the car. The cops would stop me. Sometimes they would let me go. Other times I had people outside the car hitchhiking down to Jones Beach. That was it, man.
We have a lot of similarities in our background. We're going to get into this a little bit later, but I bagged groceries in high school to make some money to pay for long distance phone bills to my girlfriend who was a year ahead of me at Michigan. And I also had a Chevy Camaro, the 4-cylinder with hubcaps that weren't hubcaps that looked like actually metal plates. But we're gonna get into some of the similarities.
Yeah, well, yeah, but you strike me as that kind of a guy. I'm not surprised by any of that. But the guy's name was Lou Campanelli. I mean, he was such a guy. And I'm going to say this to you. You remember this stuff because, like, I want to be a boss like Lou Campanelli. So, like, when I'm in a situation in my office, even though he was the local key food owner, I'm like, what would Lou do in this situation? He was such a humane, good guy, Randy, Anyway.
So at some point in your life, you made a conscious effort to be the best at whatever you did. And it sounds like you were doing that way back with the paper route. We're going to move into the education, and there's no better investment in our future than a good education. But when did you really make a conscious effort to be great at something? Was it in school so you could get into Tufts? Or was it at Tufts so you can get into Harvard?
No. I was a disaster in school, in high school. I got into Tufts because they'll be pissed at me for saying this, but I'll tell you, my father was weighing trucks when he got older. So he started as a laborer and he was a crane operator. And then when he got into his 50s, they let him weigh trucks. So you put the crushed aggregate on the truck and then you weigh the truck and then you get charged per square ton of the aggregate. And there was a guy by the name of Billy Tomaso, and may his soul rest in peace. And I think he was either on the board of trustees at Tufts. He was a huge donor. He was an alumnus of Tufts University. And he said to my pops, how many kids you have? 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl. Okay, great. Are they going to go to college? Oh, yeah. And I would want my kids to go to college. Okay, great. Where are they going to go to college? Well, there was a college down the block from us called C.W. Post College. It's like Long Island University. And my father said, well, they're going to go to C.W. Post. It's right down the block. And the guy says, no. Can't go to C.W. Post. I want to send your kids to Tufts. So my father comes home, my older brother, he looks at us. He says, forget about C.W. Post. You're going to Tufts. It's spelled Toughs. Go look it up in that stupid phone book of the colleges. Okay. So my brother gets the book out. He's opening up the book. He's like, Dad, it's not spelled T-O-U. It's T-U-F-T-S. And it's most selective. We're not going to Tufts, Dad. We don't have the grades for it. Yeah, no. This guy, Billy Tomaso, he's going to help you out. You're going to go to Tufts. So my brother went to Tufts. He's a couple of years older than me. And then my father was like Henry Ford in this respect. He was like, Aunt, you can go to any school you want as long as it's Tufts. So I ended up getting into Tufts. So I went to Tufts. So this is the moment. I was a disaster in high school. Okay. I had a very high SAT score, but I had Stugatz grades. They were like mediocre grades. And I was chasing the girls and I was driving the Camaro. That's what I was interested in. And I was working, right? So the moment in my life that changed me was April of 1982. My pops handed me a $10,000 check. It was made out to me. Dad, what is this? I said, well, I cashed in the cash value of my union life insurance. So he was putting money away every month into his life insurance policy, and it was building some cash value. And so he terminated it and he got the check and he handed it to me. And he said, I don't really have any money to send you to the school. Your brother, I gave him a little bit of money. He was on his own. I'm giving you a little bit of money. I didn't really have any money. So I cashed out of my life insurance. I said, Pops, you cashed out of your life insurance. I said, but, you put, that's fine. It's fine. You need the money, but that's really all I have. And it was April of 1982. And Randy, I don't know what it was because I was a young jerk off of a kid. Like an anvil hit me in the head, like the Wile E. Coyote. And I was like, okay, I cannot disappoint my parents. He just gave me his life insurance, canceled, and I got this $10,000 check. I paid the tuition was $24,000 plus the room and board. Okay. So I had money saved. I paid it. I don't know if you want to hear about spring break, but I could bring that up too if you're interested. And then I went to Tufts, and then I was hustling up there. I was delivering pizzas. I was delivering newspapers. I had T-shirts made. I was probably in violation of the NASCAF logos, but I made these T-shirts. I was handing out
exactly what I did. It's exactly what I
that's
did,
what
by
we
the
do.
way.
We had
Did
to-
the
we had to do-
t-shirts.
Yeah, I had to do t-shirts. We were printing them, and then I was selling them, and I had Fruit of the Loom, and I had Hanes, and and I was calling people to see if I can get a better deal. Do you know what I'm saying? And then to make a long story short, because I'm probably making it too long, I always had money though because of that. I was always hustling to make sure that I was just ahead of it. And of course, I was borrowing. I had to borrow because there was no way I could afford it all. But here's the one thing I will say about Harvard. They gave you the money, man. You got into Harvard, they were like, okay. And by the way, you remember this, the interest rates were like 9-10% back in the day. They were like, okay, we're going to give you the money. How much you need? I'm like, well, how much can I get? They're like, well, tell us what you need. And I filled out all the paperwork, and they gave me, I don't know, $60,000 or $70,000 for the 3 years at like a 3% interest rate. And so I always give to Harvard, by the way, because I know people, why the hell are you giving to Harvard? I'm giving to Harvard because they got me started, and they put me in a position, and I have an endowed like scholarship at Tufts for kids that have no money, where if they get in and the criteria of income is set up a certain way, they get some money from me to help them out with their tuition.
We have another similarity there. I endowed a scholarship at Michigan it's a full ride for someone in state, merit-based, for a student that has a interest in business. So I think it's great that you're giving back. But at some point, Anthony, you must have killed it at Tufts because you got into Harvard. And that's where that was
it. Yeah, that was the,
we differ
that was
there.
The epiphany. That was the epiphany. So I don't know why you weren't that good in school. You strike me as somebody that was very good in school.
No. I was Phi Beta Kappa my junior year. I graduated top 1% of my class, but I did not get accepted to Harvard Law School. I went to Northwestern Law School. I don't test well. My friends all went to Harvard, and I went to Northwestern, which I love, by the way. It's a fantastic school, and I'm very involved in school today.
At that level, these schools are fantastic. I always tested well for whatever reason. Everyone's got different skills. I always tested well, and I did well on the LSAT, had high grades at Tufts, like you. I was like summa cum laude, Phi Beta Kappa. I applied to 7 schools. I got rejected from Yale. And I got into the other 6 schools. I went to Harvard. And I remember the day. It was February 6th, 1986. It was Ronald Reagan's 75th birthday. I drove my Camaro down to Harvard from Tufts. It's only like 3 miles away. And I went there with a $250 check from Baybanks to lock in my position. And then, you probably don't want to hear this, but what was my next move? I turned to the lady behind. I said, how are you? Great. I said, the law firms recruit here, right? Yes, they do. Do you have a recruiting book? And she said, yes, I do. I said, oh, could I see it? She handed me this phone book of all these major law firms, right? And so then I took the Harvard alumni directory and I cross-referenced. And by the way, that's how naive I was. I wanted to be a Wall Street lawyer, Randy. So I said that Wall Street lawyers, they must be on Wall Street. So I opened up the book, looked at the addresses. There was a law firm called Hughes, Hubbard, and Reed. They were located at 1 Wall Street. And so I looked up the partners of Hughes, Hubbard, and Reed that were in the Harvard Law alumni directory. I wrote them all down. I typed up my resume on a Panasonic typewriter, and I went to New York, and I cold called these people. This is before 9/11, right? So I went to the 1 Wall Street, rode the elevator to the 28th floor. The elevator opened up. There I am standing there in my like polyester suit. How are you? I'm here to see like Worthington Babscom the 32nd or some shit like that. And she's like, well, is he expecting you? I said, I don't know. I mean, well, I think he is. I said, of course I told a fib. I said, the Harvard placement people told me to come see him. And so the guy comes out with the fucking suspenders on and he says, come on in here. I said, yeah. I said, well, listen, sir. I said, I'm at Tufts. I'm about to graduate. I got accepted to Harvard. I have no money. But I'm willing to work hard. Here's my transcript. And I'll come in every day. I'll work throughout the night. I don't care. But I need some experience. I also need some money. I got to pay for this thing. So he looks at me and he says, I'll start you at $8 an hour. So, Randy, you know what I said to him? Could you make it 10? He goes, wow, you have some brass balls as a kid. You have some brass balls. I said, well, I need the money. You know what? I'm going to make it 10. So that summer they killed me. I worked on the People's Express merger with Continental Airlines, summer of 1986. And they were paying me $10 an hour. And I got overtime there and they gave me some money and I was able to, that really helped me to get through school.